Dear learners, welcome to the third video lecture of the course on Gender and the Media. This unit has been titled Communication Theories. In the previous lectures, you have been familiarized with the concept of communication, how it takes place, and what are its functions. And here we will try to give you an idea about the various theories of communication studies which would form a base for you to understand the role of communication in a particular society. And I hope it will make you understand what role media plays in gender studies. Communication is deeply rooted in human behavior and human societies, and communication is always there in all forms of social and behavioral events. If we look at the etymology, communication comes from the word communicare, which literally means to put in common or to share. The term originally meant sharing of tangible things such as food, land, goods, and property. And however, today it is often applied to the knowledge and information sharing, which are processed by living things or by computers. We might say that communication consists of transmitting information. In fact, many scholars of communication studies are working on its very definition. And the definition given by Harold Lasswell, when he says who says what to whom, it is used to describe what communication is. The field of communication theory can benefit from a conceptualization of communication that is widely shared. It is an attempt to document types of communication and to optimize communications for the benefit of all. From the history of communication theory, it is learned that at the time of the First World War, the interest in communication studies increased and the social science study was fully recognized as a legitimate discipline after the Second World War. The Universal Communication Law asserts all living entities communicate. All living entities communicate via movements, sounds, reactions, physical changes, gestures, languages, etc. These all has been discussed in the previous lectures. Now let us come to the theoretical part of communication. Theory is a conceptual observation of a set of events based on thorough research, and the research on understanding communication process can be termed as communication theory. Our discussion on some important theories will focus on the role of communication in the society and the way audience react to the media. Let us start with the hypodermic needle or bullet theory. Bullet theory came into existence during the Second World War. It suggests that messages were thought to be like magic bullets that were shot directly at the receiver or at the consumers, and the consumers or the receiver were assumed as passive in nature. So this theory doesn't exist any longer because the various communication theorists do not support the views presented by this particular theory. According to the needle theory or the bullet theory, mass media has a direct, immediate and powerful effect on audiences. In the 1940s and 1950s, it was observed that mass media had a powerful influence on behavior changes. The fast popularization of radio and television, the emergence of the persuasion media industries along with advertising and propaganda, the impact of motion pictures and the use of mass media during the Second World War to unify the German public behind the Nazi Party, these all contributed to this strong effects theory of communication. Harold Lasswell pioneered the work of propaganda technique in the World War in 1927. He gave his opinion that the people had been duped and degraded by propaganda during the war. Lasswell based his work on a stimulus response model focusing on mass effects. This approach cited human feedbacks to the media as uniform and immediate. E. D. Martin, he opined that, within quotes, propaganda offers ready-made opinions for the unthinking herd. The magic bullet or the hypodermic needle theory sometimes is not widely accepted by scholars. Some of them say that it is thought that it was not based on empirical results from research, but rather on assumptions of the time about human nature. People were assumed to be consistently managed by instincts, and those they gave reaction uniformly to whatever stimuli came along. Next, let us talk about the uses and gratification theory. It is a very popular approach in mass communication. This theory gives more importance to the consumer or the audience or the receiver instead of giving importance to the actual message itself. They ask that what people do with media rather than asking what media does to people. Okay? And it was said by Katz. It presumes that audience are not passive, but audience can take an active role in the interpretation and amalgamating media into their own lives. The theory also holds the audience responsible for choosing media to meet their own needs. So this approach, it opines that people use the media to fulfill specific gratifications or satisfactions. So this theory would imply that the media competes against other information sources for the viewer's gratification. So one influential tradition in media research is referred to as uses and gratification. So this approach focuses on why people use a particular media rather than on content. In contrast to the concern of the media effects tradition with what media do to people. Okay, so uses and gratification theory can be seen as a part of the broader trend against media researchers, which is more concerned with what people do with media. Okay, so it allows for a variety of responses and interpretations. This particular theory, it originally arose in the 1940s and it underwent a revival in the 1970s and 1980s. Bloomer and Katz mentions that this approach emerged from the functionalist paradigm in the social sciences, where the use of media is depicted in terms of gratification of social and psychological needs of the individual. The mass media compete with other sources of gratification, but gratifications can be obtained from a medium's content. For example, by watching a specific program, from familiarity with a genre within the medium, for example soap operas, okay, or from general exposure to the medium, for example watching television, and from the social context in which it is used, for example watching the television with your entire family. The same television program may gratify different needs for different individuals. Different needs are associated with individual personalities, stages of maturation, their backgrounds and their different social roles. So it varies from individual to individual. So Dennis McQuell offers some typology for using media. First is information. Audience need information from immediate surroundings, society and the world for taking decisions, seeking advice or opinion. Personal identity. For personal identity, they need reinforcement of personal values and insights into one's self. Social empathy. Gaining a sense of belonging, social interaction to carry out social roles and to be in society, they need media use. The uses and gratification approach has been criticized as vulgar gratification. It is individualistic and psychologistic gratification. It is a tend to ignore the socio-cultural context. As a theoretical stance, it foregrounds individual psychological and personality factors and backgrounds sociological interpretations. Now let's talk about the cognitive dissonance theory a little bit. Leon Festinger, he proposed a set of studies to condense a theory about communication's social influences. So cognitive dissonance enjoyed great popularity from the late 1950s through the mid 1970s. Cognitive dissonance is a communication theory adopted from social psychology, where cognitive means thinking or the mind, and dissonance refers to inconsistency or disagreement, And cognitive dissonance is the psychological conflict between holding two or more mismatched beliefs at once. It is relatively a clear-cut social psychology theory and has agreed with wide receipt in a variety of disciplines including communication. The theory replaces reinforcement theories by viewing individuals as more purposeful decision makers. According to this theory, individuals struggle for equilibrium in their beliefs. So if they are presented with decisions or information that create disagreements or dissonance, they uses dissonance reduction strategies to regain balance, especially in the disturbances or problems influences their self-worth. Okay, according to the theory, dissonance is psychologically rough enough to induce people to attain consonance. Okay, so in a stage of dissonance or conflict, people will keep away from information and situations that might increase their disagreements, increase their problems. So it can be visualized how problems can occur because it is sometimes obvious in an information-rich society, and to deal with it is more difficult. So dissonance theory applies to all situations involving attitude formation and change. So this theory influences people with certain behavior so that these people change their approach themselves. It is especially applicable in decision making and problem solving. For example, consider a motorbiker who refuses to use a helmet despite knowing that the law requires it and it saves lives. Then a news report on an accident for not using helmet changes his habit, or seeking information that is consonant with the behavior. Full helmet is safer than half one. If the rider never faces a situation that threatens the decision not to use the helmet, then no dissonance reduction action is likely because the impulsion to decrease dissonance depends on the extent of the dissonance held. Cultivation theory by George Gardner stresses on the opinion that mass media has subtle effect on audience who absorbs the message of the media. With the help of constant exposure to media, people are able to cultivate some common conceptions on the world. The theory views that the television does not portray the image and messages of the real world or the real society. Repeated presentation of these types of images which are not real by television may lead the society to distortion rather than development. For example, the usual projection of colorful, expensive clothes, jewelry, and high-cost cars and flats cannot be beneficial for the poor and underprivileged community. The various principles of this theory are can be discussed, such as media is a powerful weapon to cultivate common beliefs among the general masses. The television is not quite real message sender in the society. The influential effect of mass media proceeds as molders of the society. They may mold how people think in a society. Cultivation analysis, it concentrates on long-term effects of exposure than the short-term impact on approach and opinion. If something is repeated again and again, the audience might cultivate the habit. They might believe what it is saying, what is being shown. Then let us talk about another important theory which would help you in understanding the relation of communication in gender studies, is the social learning theory. Social learning theory, or SLT, explains that people learn new behavior through overt reinforcement or punishment, or via observational learning of the social factors in their environment. If people observe something positive, if they observe that their desired outcomes might come, then they are more likely to imitate, model, or adopt the behavior themselves. Social learning theory is derived from the work of Cornell Montgomery, and it proposes that social learning occurs through 4 main stages: imitation, such as close contact, imitation of superiors, understanding of concepts, role model behavior. So it consists of 3 parts: observing, imitating, and reinforcements. Rotter suggests that the effect of behavior has an impact on the motivation of people to engage in that specific behavior. People wish to avoid negative consequences while desiring positive results or effects. If one expects a positive outcome from a behavior or thinks that there is the high probability of a positive outcome from a particular behavior or a particular work, then that particular person will be more likely to engage in that behavior. The behavior is reinforced with positive outcomes, leading a person to repeat the behavior. So this social learning theory suggests that behavior is influenced by these environmental factors or stimulus and not psychological factors alone. Social learning theory is a combination of behavioral and cognitive theories. Albert Bandura suggests that both internal and external factors are equally important. The basic equation here is personal factors such as beliefs, expectations, attitudes, and knowledge, which are cognitive, plus environmental factors such as resources, consequences of actions, physical settings, these are behavioral factors. Okay, plus behaviors such as individual actions, choices, and verbal statements. They influence learning and motivation. So in today's society, media has a powerful influence on our lives. As children enter adolescence, what happens? The print and electronic media and now new media as well, they help these children to define who they are and what they want to become. By the time children reach middle school, they have spent tens and thousands of hours watching television, movies, videos on the internet, listening to the radio, reading magazines, newspapers, and books, right? And surfing various sites on the internet. So advertisers such as of alcohol, they use power and influence of media to convey a positive image of their products. Okay, for example, alcohol advertisements, they might glorify drinking, glamorize drinking, and it may play a role in promising the teenagers that alcohol drinking would provide fun, popularity, relaxation, and escape. So social learning theory has generated much research. Evidences show that social learning theory and one's sense of self-efficacy predicts such diverse outcomes such as alcohol abuse, smoking cessation, pain tolerance, etc. And from this you can learn how it can affect in inculcating or removing gender biasness from the society. Bandura believes humans are active information processors, and that the relationship between their behavior and its consequences is very important. Albert Bandura's theory, it suggests that people learn new behaviors by observing and imitating others, that we have already discussed. So, but this particular theory basically emphasizes on the importance of observational learning, where individuals acquire knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs by watching the actions of others and the consequences that follow. So it leads to modeling and adoption of observed behaviors. So social learning theory, it emphasizes on the importance of observation, modeling, and imitating the behavior, attitude, and emotional reactions of others. He also adds two important ideas. Mediating processes occur between stimuli and responses. Behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. So observational learning could not occur unless cognitive processes were at work. So these mental factors mediate or intervene in the learning process to determine whether a new response is acquired. Therefore, individuals do not automatically observe the behavior of a model and imitate it. There is some thought prior to imitation, and this consideration is called the mediational process. According to Bandura, the four mediational processes are attention. The first one is attention. Attentional processes are crucial because mere exposure to a model does not ensure that observers will pay attention. The model must capture the observer's interest, right? The individual need to pay attention to the behavior and its consequences and form a mental representation of the behavior. Second is retention. Bandura highlighted the retention process in imitation, where individuals symbolically store a model's behavior in their minds. So for successful imitation, observers must save these behaviors in symbolic forms, actively organizing them into easily recalled templates. So how well the behavior is remembered, it is important. The behavior may be noticed, but it is not always remembered. So it is important that a memory of the behavior is formed to be performed later by the observer. So much of social learning is not immediate. So this process is especially vital in those cases. Third is motor reproduction. This is the ability to perform the behavior that the model has just demonstrated. We see much behavior daily that we would like to be able to imitate, but this is not always possible. Our physical ability limits us. So even if we wish to reproduce the behavior, we sometimes cannot. Motor reproduction processes use internal symbolic images of the observed behavior to guide the actions. An observer internally replicates behavior using these symbols as a reference, even if it is not externally shown. Fourth is the motivation. Motivational and reinforcement processes refer to the perceived favorable or unfavorable consequences of mimicking the model's actions that are likely to increase or decrease the likelihood of imitation. So when we are saying model, when we are using this word model, so individuals that are observed are called models. In society, children are surrounded by many influential models such as parents within the family, characters on children's television, friends within their peer group, and teachers at school. So these models provide examples of behavior to observe and imitate. Children pay attention to some of these people which we are referring to as models and encode their behavior. At the later time, they may imitate or copy the behavior they have observed. So they may do this regardless of whether the behavior is gender appropriate or not, within quotes, but there are several processes that make it more likely that a child will reproduce the behavior that society deems appropriate for its gender. So social learning theorists have shown that behavior is influenced not only by personal or live models but also by those which are represented in the mass media. Television and film models in particular seem to exert a powerful impact, and one major implication is that television is shaping humans' motivation and behavior on a daily basis. Social learning theorists have been specially concerned with televised violence and use of alcohol and its effect on children. Research has shown that in fact it can increase children's aggressiveness and tendency to consume alcohol within their lifetime. Let us end our discussion today with the last theory, that is the dependency theory. It is essentially a body of social science theories predicted on the notion that resources flow from a periphery of poor and underdeveloped states to a core of wealthy states, enriching the latter at the expense of the former. It is a central contention of dependency theory that poor states are improvised and rich ones enriched by the way poor states are integrated into the world system. So earlier theories of development mentioned that all societies should progress through similar stages of development, that today's underprivileged, underdeveloped areas are thus in a similar situation to that of today's developed areas in some time in the past, and that therefore the task in helping the underdeveloped areas out of poverty is to accelerate them along this supposed common path of development. This theory came around 1950s as a reaction to the earlier theories that rejected this particular argument. So it argues that the underdeveloped countries are not merely primitive versions of the developed countries, but they have unique features and structures of their own, and most importantly they are in the situation of being the weaker members in the world economy or the world market. So Sandra Ball-Rockish and Melvin D. Fleur, they proposed this dependency theory in 1976, and it integrates several viewpoints like the merging of psychology and social perspectives. On one hand, it puts together the system perspectives into elements from more causal approaches. It blends components from the uses and gratification research with those of media effects traditions, and finally philosophy is integrated in the theory, which also describes the traditional method with the content of media messages and their effects on audience. I hope the discussion on this particular this few theories that we have discussed so far, that has given you an idea of how mass media can influence the society in one way or the other. So this base would help us in discussing further the effect of mass media or communication in understanding gender and in understanding the social behavior towards gender studies. We will further study about some theories related to cinema and film in our later modules, and we will meet again in the next video lectures. Thank you.